Okay, so let's get into it. So last week we looked at, we had an introduction to AWS, Amazon Web Services. This is the infrastructure track. And for those, I think Ayotomi asked about what infrastructure is. Essentially, infrastructure is the computers or the servers and networks, right, that are available, not just servers, but all the computing resources that will be used in the on the back end of for applications and services, right? If you think about how the internet is set up, the internet is a series of servers connected on a network, but there are networks connected to each other. So the internet is internetwork, which is a network of networks. So if you think about how you have things set up at home, right? You have a Wi-Fi network at home. That's a network, right? You're probably on, 3, 4, 5, 6 different computers. You may have tablets, you may have phones connected to that Wi-Fi network. They are all part of that home network, right? Now that home network is then connected to the internet, right? Maybe through Verizon or through Comcast or something else. So you have your home network connected to a network that has other home networks connected to it and other business networks and all of that. All of those networks connected together make up the internet. Okay? Now, there is a subset of the internet called the World Wide Web, which is, web servers on the internet. But the internet as a whole is larger than the World Wide Web. There are email servers and streaming servers and, all kinds of devices that aren't part of the World Wide Web, like smart devices. There's what's called the Internet of Things. So you have, smart thermostats and home security systems and all of that. Those are all connected to the internet. They're not connected to the World Wide Web necessarily, but they're connected to the internet, right? So the internet is a network of networks. Infrastructure is those pieces that make up the various networks. As far as this course is concerned, we're looking at virtual infrastructure, right? So virtual servers on Amazon Web Services, right? The server is just a computer. It's a computer that's designed to serve requests from other computers, or essentially it's a server. It serves other computing needs, right? So they're typically a lot more powerful than your little laptop, right? They typically have a lot more storage and a lot more processing power and a lot more memory, okay? The servers, the resources they provide, the networks that they operate on, the security policies and all of that around them, all of that together is what we call infrastructure, because it's the base on which the applications and, the software and all of that, it's the base on which they reside. So that's the infrastructure. So this track is really just about that. Servers, networks, that's all this is about, right? Any programming that's done in this track will be programming to facilitate the infrastructure. We'll be programming to help the servers do certain things or to help achieve certain objectives. But they won't be programming to create a software that the world will use. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, any questions so far? Okay. So, in the last class, we talked about AWS. We talked about how it's based off of cloud computing, right? We talked about the benefits of cloud computing, the ability to scale up and scale down very quickly, right? The ability to be a lot more efficient in managing your costs, not having to build, you know, huge servers, anticipating huge demand, or not falling into a situation where you haven't built servers large enough. Cloud computing allows you to scale up and scale down as quickly as you need, right? We talked about the fact that AWS is located in multiple different regions. We said that a region is a geographical area, right? So you have regions in North America and South America and Western Europe and Eastern Europe and Western Asia and Eastern Asia and Africa. Those are all regions. And we talked about there being what's called availability zones and regions. We haven't really looked at using availability zones, but over the course of this course, we will actually experience like availability zones, excuse me, and we will use them, or we'll set up, resources in specific availability zones. Okay, and then we jump into EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud, which is essentially how you can create, virtual machines in AWS, essentially virtual computers. Okay, and we created an EC2 instance. Each of us did, or each of us were expected to create an EC2 instance, and we saw how we could connect to it and install software. Now, the EC2 instances that we created were Linux instances, Ubuntu, right? We saw the different options that we could have for creating an instance. And one of the things that I was planning on talking about today, some people have already done, right? And which is solving a problem that a lot of people had in the backend squad, which was setting up their MySQL database. One of the great things about EC2 instances is that you can set up a MySQL server. You can create a new EC2 instance that's just going to serve as your MySQL server, right? And you can use that and connect it from your local. Okay, that way you don't have to install a MySQL server on your local machine, especially if your local machine is already slow. You can create an EC2 instance in AWS, install MySQL server on it, and have it handle that load for you, right? That's something you can do. Now you know how to do it. If you need anything, you can just spin up an instance in AWS. You can go spin up an instance in AWS to give you the computing power that you need rather than having to go down to Best Buy or wherever, Target, to buy a new computer. You can just go on AWS and spin up an instance and you have a new computer. Well, without the screen and keyboard and all of that, but you can essentially provision a machine to serve your computing needs. Okay? Any questions so far before we jump in? Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to pick up where we left off. From what I hear, most people have been able to start and stop their EC2 instances and have been able to connect to them. So you can see my screen. I need to go in and start my EC2 instance. So give me 1 second here while I log in. Now, if you remember from that first class, we also talked about the different interfaces you have for administering your AWS services, right? You have 3 options. You can use the AWS Management Console, You can use the AWS CLI, the command line interface, or you can use the AWS SDK. For now, we're going to do everything that we need through the management console, but a little further down later in the course, we might explore some CLI options. Okay. So when you come into the AWS management console, and you can do that by just coming here to the home page when you sign in. That's the management console. Okay. If you are not on it, you can get to it by just clicking the AWS logo on the top left. Now, in the management console, we're going to go to EC2. If you don't see EC2, your screen may look different from this. Each person's screen will look different based on what services they've been using, because this top here, this top panel shows recently visited services. So the services that you have visited will be different from other people. What's important is to find EC2. If it's on that list, just type EC2 here, and it should show up. And we're going to EC2. We're not going to EC2 image builder. We're just going to list. Now, when you come in here to EC2, you may get this screen. We have resources and have all kinds of other things here. Just come to the running instances, or on the left pane here, just come to instances. When you click on instances, then you have the list of instances right here. Now, the EC2 instance that I created last time is called training test. So I'm just going to select it here. I'm going to come to actions, instance state, and start. And then it just asks to confirm that I do want to start it, and I'll say yes, I want to start. And that starts up my instance. Now, the instance we created last time was an Ubuntu image, which means it has Ubuntu 18.04, I believe, running on it. Okay, that's the version of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a flavor of Linux. So that instance is running Linux, but it's running the Ubuntu flavor of Linux. So the commands that we used were specifically, were specifically Ubuntu commands, but we went apt-get install. Right? If we installed another flavor of Linux, the Amazon AMI or Red Hat, the command to install would be different.
Sorry,
Okay.
if I might chime in, I kind of noticed when I was doing my own install that the apt-get, I was getting an error if I use the apt-get, but when I use just apt install, it worked.
Well, you have to sudo apt-get.
Yeah, I did sudo apt-get, and I was getting errors. The only way I was able to do it was to do sudo apt install without the get.
Okay, so we'll look at that. We can look at that after the class. Ubuntu supports both.
Okay.
There's a slight difference in them, but they're both based off of the same thing. It's more about the type of feedback that you get. But we can look at that after. All right, so I have my EC2 instance running right now. And this is the public DNS for my instance. I can copy that. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to connect into my instance. Remember, you can do that if you don't remember how to connect. You click on connect here. It's going to give you the information on how to connect to that instance. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up a terminal here. And I'm going to connect to the instance with SSH. That's kind of the only way you can actually connect to it, because the instance is headless. It has no user interface that you can use. So you have to connect to it on the command line. So, and you can do that from Git Bash in Windows, and the Mac or Linux from a terminal. I'm going to do SSH. -I is to use my identifier or my key, my private key that I downloaded. For me, It is in my .ssh folder, test instance. And then you are always connecting as the EC2 user. So you have to do user at, okay? And I press enter, yes. Just see what's going on here. This is connection code by that. So what key pair is being used here? It's still using the test instance. Hold on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Oh, sorry. It's an Ubuntu machine, so my it's not, we're not connecting as EC2 user, we're connecting as Ubuntu.
Yeah, I was
That
about to
was
say
my
when we did
mistake.
it the last time it was Ubuntu. Doesn't mean that when we want to connect again, we'll have to change
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so I've used a lot of Amazon AMIs, and so usually the user is EC2 user, but for the Ubuntu machines, it's Ubuntu. All right, so let's take note of, I mean, if we do use the instructions here, the reason I missed that was because I didn't use the instructions here. I was just doing it from a previous experience. All right. Okay, so on Ubuntu now, and if I do ls, I can see I have the classroom folder that I cloned. So I'm going to change it to the classroom folder. And here, so cd classroom. CD here. All right. And ls here, we have everything, node modules. I'm going to do a git pull just to have the latest version of it. I've done a git pull. Right. Now, here's where, if I try to start this, if I say node index, right? Of course, this is going to fail because I don't have a MySQL server running on this, right? But let's work on the Angular app because that doesn't need MySQL or anything. So let's use that to get ourselves set up. So I'm going to cd web app here, npm install, just in case I'm missing anything. And like I told you, whenever you pull, it's always a good idea to do npm install before you continue. That way you have all the packages or any packages that anybody else may have added to package.json. Make sure that your code base is up to date. So now that I have this, I can do ngs. And remember, you can't do serve open for those who are in the front end squad because there's no browser to open. Yeah. You're not on your, at this point here, once you're connected through SSH, you're no longer on your local computer. You're now on a cloud computer that you created, an EC2 instance. So your open command will do nothing on that computer because it has no user interface. So what we're going to do here, our objective here is to get this started, and then we're going to do some more of the configuration that we need for us to be able to connect to this web application running on this server. Okay. And we just wait a couple of minutes for this to complete. While this is working, any questions so far?
Yes, I have a question on my end. I
Okay.
tried the npm install. So I'm on the Windows. I'm using Git Bash. I'm in the class. I'm in the web app folder. But then when I type npm install, I don't see it do what yours did. It basically went to the next line, but it
It
didn't
did
do anything.
nothing.
Yes.
It means you are up to date already.
Okay.
Yeah. So that means you're fine. You did, as long as you didn't get an error saying npm is not recognized, or you have a no news, what we call a no news is good news situation.
Okay.
Okay. If anything fails, you typically will get feedback. But if you don't get any feedback, that's no news, and that's usually good news.
Quick one. When in the classroom, after doing the git pull, we must always do an npm install, then go to the change directory to web app, and then still do npm install.
Yes, because what's in web app is a different node application from what's in. The root of Classroom has its own package JSON.
Mm-hmm.
The web app has its own package JSON. They're two separate.
Okay, thanks. Just want to clarify that.
So are you saying we should do an npm install for both right now?
Whenever you pull, if you're going to do work in the web app folder, you should do an npm install there to make sure you have the latest packages.
I see.
That to make sure you're up to date with what's defined in package JSON.
I see.
Right.
But
Because the root of Classroom is the backend server. The web app folder is the front end Angular application. They're two different applications. They're just in the same folder structure because we're going with what some call a mono repo style, where the front end and back end are in the same repository. But the back end is in the root of Classroom and the front end is in web app. So they're two package JSONs. And if you look in there, you see that they each have a package JSON, right? So you need to do separate npm installs for that. All right. So now we have this server running here, right? And it tells me that I can access it at localhost 4200. Well, this is what it's saying, but localhost is not my localhost. It is localhost to this server. So it really is saying that we should be able to access it when we come here. And let's try to go to port 4200 here. So it's saying I should be able to go to this address, port 4200 here, to access that running. But what you'll notice here is that this is just spinning. Nothing's happening. And the reason is because of how AWS is set up. And we'll talk about that. Right. So what we have is that we have this machine, this EC2 instance that we've created. It is on a network in AWS, right? But that network currently does not have any rule that tells it to allow traffic to come in through port 4200. We're trying to access the server through port 4200. Port 200 is essentially a door. But let's think about it like this. Let's assume you go into an office building, right? And you're trying to access a resource, right, in room 4200, right? But you have the front door is locked. Or 4200 is in a section of the building that you have to have a special badge to have access to, right? You can't get to that room without either them opening up 4200 to the public so that you without a badge can get in, or without being an insider, someone with a badge. So what we need to do here is to make port 4200 on this server accessible to the world, to traffic coming from outside of the network, because that's what's happening here. When you're connected, remember, each of us is connecting from our home network, right? But our EC2 instance is in AWS. That's a completely different network. So we're not insiders as far as the network the EC2 instance is concerned. We are coming from outside. Let's solve that problem. It may sound a little complex right now, but at some point later, we're going to talk about routing and security, and it's going to become easier to understand. All right. If we look here, right, at our instance, and we scroll down here, right, in this bottom section of the screen, you have the details for the instance. This tells you everything about how this instance is set up. Okay. And one of the things that you have here, you have information about the subnets, you have information about the VPC, right? You have information about the networks. These are all very technical things. I'm not going to jump into them. And then on the right here, you have a bunch of other information about the machine itself, right? What we're missing here is we're missing this subnet being on a security group that allows the traffic that we need. And I'm going to show you an example here. Here I have, let me start up this instance so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, actually I won't start it up. Here, if you look at this one here, right, you'll see that I have a security group defined on this one. And if we actually come to this security group here, right, we have what are called inbound rules and outbound rules. Inbound rules are the rules that allow traffic coming in to the instance, right? And if we look, we see that we have rules that allow traffic to come into HTTP at port 80. Who remembers what port 80 is?
The default.
Right, this is your default web port. When you go to a web address, www.whatever, it goes to port 80. Now for this server, we've created a custom rule to allow traffic to go to port 8080. Okay? This here is what we need. We need something like this for our EC2 instance to allow traffic to go to port 4200. Okay? By default, it allows traffic to go to port 22, which is the SSH port, which is why I can connect to the server here. I connected through SSH, right? So there's that default one. That's how I can connect. So what we need to do for that server is to add inbound rules that allows traffic to go to port 4200. And that way, we will be able to we'll be able to browse the application that we have running at port 4200. So we're going to just come back here to instances, and we're going to select training tests. And let's look at the security groups that we have here. We have Launch Wizard 2, right? And let's view inbound rules. It only has port 22 open. So let's go there. And let's look at this. So our inbound rules. only port 22. So what we want to do is on the right here, we want to edit inbound rules, right? And we want to add a new rule, okay? And it's a custom TCP rule. And what ports do we want to open up, right? Let's say we want to open up ports. We want to open up port 4200. Let's just open up only that port for now, right? And then the source. Excuse me, please just off your mute. Now the source here, we're going to select anywhere because we want to say, hey, any traffic coming from anywhere in the internet, right? We want it to allow to hit that port, okay? And these are the two. So that means, and then we can come here and we're good. So let's just save rules. So now we have this. We now have rules that allow traffic coming in from port, coming into port 4200 on our server. So if we come now, let's see what happens. Oh, hold on. Let's come back to our instances. And this is the instance that we have. Let's view our inbound rules. Make sure that we have the traffic to 4200. And let's make sure that we have this application running here. I'm just going to run that again. Check. Okay, so let's copy this here. Do that. Yeah. Let's have a little bit of an issue here. All right, I'll have to come back to this and debug this later, but let's move on. I don't want to hold up the class just debugging this. I want to talk about a couple of other topics that we have, and then I'll come back to the resolution of this, okay? But this is how you define what traffic, what ports are open or not on your EC2 instances through the security groups. We're going to have a class that's specifically around security. And in that, we will talk in detail about what security groups are, what they do, what they don't do, and all of that. Okay. Right now, we'll just move on to the next topic I had lined up, which is Amazon S3. Okay, I'm going to leave this one, and I'll resolve this, and then we'll revisit this, and then I'll tell everyone how to get that fixed. But right now, I don't want to start digging into it. It could take 5 minutes, and it could take an hour to resolve what's going on here. All right, let's talk about AWS S3. This is another service on AWS, and S3 stands for Simple Storage Service. Okay, S3 is very useful because it provides online storage, right? Network storage that is available to multiple different instances or services, right? AWS S3 is very powerful. Now, if you think about a typical use case for S3, if I wrote a server that uploads files, right, and somebody else, maybe Wale, writes another server that retrieves files, and my server is on one EC2 instance and Wale's server is on another EC2 instance, I have to be able to store those files in a place that's accessible to both servers, right? In a physical infrastructure, that would be a network shared drive or a network drive, right? Or a storage area network, right? That would be, rather than it being a hard drive on one of the machines that I'm opening up, it'll actually be some kind of central storage that both machines have access to. S3 provides that capability, okay? S3 allows you to store data essentially in a network storage space that you can access from multiple different resources, including the internet. So let's go into S3 and let's play with this. If you come here and you search S3, right? That's the simple storage. And sorry, Firefox does, or AWS crashes on Firefox for some reason. But this is Amazon S3. This is one of the most popular and most highly used services in AWS. Okay. Because think about it, it gives you almost infinite storage space. And you only pay for the storage that you use. Now, one of the things that you find that's different in S3 from EC2 is that S3 has no regions. If you come up to the top right here to the region selector, where we select regions for EC2, you see that S3 does not have regions. And there's no option for selecting. The regions are all disabled, and you have a message here that tells you that S3 does not require region selection. Who can remind me what a region is or why we have regions?
So that if you're running something that requires pulling data, you want it closer to your region, so latency or something. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, regions help with latency. Yes.
Also
What's a
help-
region? Yeah. Vale?
See, I was going to say they also help with security, but now you're asking me what the region is, and I'm running away. Bye-bye.
Okay, so what's a
So-
region?
Region is where the Amazon service is provided, where it's located rather.
Okay.
A region is locations where data centers are located for the I'm sorry,
Right.
my mind just went blank. I'm looking for a
Right.
specific word.
Yeah.
You know, for the creation of, for the dissection of their traffic to different data centers and different
Right. So a
countries.
region, a region is a specific geographical area, right? And you have data centers in. So that is, a region is really data centers in a specific geographical area. The region that's closest to us here is US East, North Virginia, right? But with S3, there are no regions. Whatever you put in an S3 bucket, I will say what the bucket is available to all regions. Now, of course, there are ways you can restrict access to the bucket to specific instances of services or people and all of that. There's a quite robust suite of security configuration you can do on an S3 bucket. But today we're gonna explore S3 and explore how cool and fun it is. Now, the basic structure of S3 is based around buckets. Buckets are essentially like directories, pretty much. Right? They're like folders. So you can create buckets, and you can create buckets within buckets, like you can create folders within folders. Right? So you will hear the term S3 bucket a lot. Okay? So what we're going to do right now, we're going to do an exercise where we will create an S3 bucket. We will actually use that S3 bucket to serve a static web page. Okay? And we'll look at different permission settings and stuff around S3 buckets. So let's just have some fun. Let's play with S3 buckets a little bit. So when you come to S3, you can see right here, it tells you how many buckets you have. At the top right here, you have a create bucket button. So when we click on this, you get a bucket creation wizard, pretty much, right? We're going to give our bucket a name. So I'm just going to call this training bucket. Sorry, do that again. Training bucket. All right. Now here, for this particular bucket, we can specify a region limitation or region restriction for that bucket. All right. So we want this bucket to be US North Virginia. Okay. So what you notice here is that the regions are, you can specify them on a bucket by bucket basis. But S3 by itself is global. All right. So I want this bucket to be available for this region. All right. Now, bucket settings to block public access. You can say, yeah, block all public access, or I can uncheck that, right? And I can say, okay, block public access to buckets and objects granted through, new access control files. These are more complex concepts. We're not going to go through them today. We'll block public access to buckets and objects granted through any access control files. These are, right? And I've unchecked this, in which case I am not blocking public access, right? For this bucket. And here I have a warning now that it says turning off all public access might result in this bucket and the objects within it becoming public, right? And there's a whole recommendation, AWS recommends and all of that. And they actually require you to now acknowledge that. So they're essentially saying, hey, you're about to give yourself a lot of headache, you're on your own if you do this. But if I actually block public access, then I don't have that warning. So I'm gonna allow public access for the exercise I want to perform. And I'm gonna check that box. And let's look at advanced settings, right? Object locks. Then this is all storyline advanced stuff. Let's not bother with that right now. And then I'm gonna create my bucket. Sorry, my bucket name contains invalid characters. All right. And that bucket name already exists, okay? Let's see. Let's call this S3.
So did you disable object lock, or did you leave it enabled, or did you enable it?
Sorry?
Your object
No,
lock, did you?
I left it at its default.
Okay.
Whatever it was, yeah. I just left it at its default. I didn't touch it. All right, let's see. All right. Let's see. Let's try that. I'm going to click on Align Cat Training Bucket. Okay. And so now I have a bucket. Right. And if you look at this right here, it says objects in this bucket can be public. So let's go into this bucket, and we can go into a bucket by just clicking its name. Now, one thing about S3 is this. Clicking on the name of a bucket, it does a different thing. Clicking on this here, it's like an option, allows you to just select multiple buckets. All right. Now, clicking, oh, actually allows you to select a specific bucket and then you can perform actions. All right. Now, clicking on, okay, so they've changed how this works, which is cool. Because previously you could click on the body of a bucket and then it will perform other options. All right, so clicking on the name, we'll go into this bucket, and then we can remember a bucket is like a directory, right? So we're in this bucket now. You can actually upload files into this bucket. You can create folders within this bucket, right? And so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an index HTML file and drop in this bucket. So here, my computer here, I'm just going to click on index HTML file, right? Let's reset. All right. So I just created an index HTML file, and I'm going to come here and upload it into my bucket. So to upload it, we're going to use the upload function here, or the upload button there. And then here you have add files, or you can drag and drop files, right? So I'm going to use add files here. Open up my file explorer here, and let's go into training classroom, and here's my index HTML file. Then I click on upload. Okay, so now I have a file here in my S3 bucket. I can click on this checkbox to select one or more files, right? I can click on the body here and I get this dialog here that allows me to download the file, copy the path of the file, right? Or select an icon for the file. So what copy path does is it allows you to actually paste an S3 path for it. Now, this is useless to most people. I'm going to show you a better way of sharing that file with other people. Okay, so for now, this is my file right here. You can click on this, the name of the file here, and this gives you a view of the details of the file. You have the last modified and all of that, and you have the object URL. This is what I was talking about when I said I can give you an easier way of viewing this. And I can actually take this URL, and I can copy link location, and then I can paste this here. All right. Now we have a problem. Let me use Chrome just to make sure I'm not having a Firefox issue here. Okay. I have a problem here in that, I don't know, we have some kind of error here, but let's go back to S3 and see what's going on. But that's how we copy the path to an object. Now, what permissions do we have set on this object? We'll go back into our folder, right? And we can look at permissions here. block public access is blocked, and all of that. Before we deal with permissions on this particular file, let's just work around our the bucket that we created. So right here in the bucket, right, similar to what we saw with the file, at the top here we have 5 tabs. This is an overview of the bucket, which gives you a list of the contents of the bucket. So you can create a new folder in here, right? And we can call this, let's say, work stuff. Okay. And let's set the permissions on this. We're gonna leave it here and say use bucket settings, right? I don't want to talk about these right now, right? So let's just save this, and now we have a folder. And we can come in this folder, and we can upload files into it. You notice how this is different from when we click on a file that we uploaded. What you get when you click on a folder, it actually goes into the folder. But with a file, it shows you the details of that file. You have an option to download the file, right? Now, you will notice something on that file, and I didn't point that out before, but notice that we have a button here called Make Public, right? If we click on this, right, we get this success. Now, let's see if that solves our problem with, it does. It allows us to actually now view that file. Any questions so far?
Quick one,
Yeah.
Yinka.
Okay, go on.
Yes. Mhm.
No, I just wanted to, I would like to clarify. So a bucket, if it's somebody really trying to struggle to understand what it is like a C drive on your system, right?
No.
Conceptually.
Not really.
Okay.
It's more like a top level folder. Well, yes, okay, so I'll say like a C drive, but most people here don't know what a C drive is. Right? So think of it as, it works almost just like a folder, right? In that you can have many, many buckets and you can create them on the fly.
So
The
can
concept
I,
of creating, yes, sorry, one second. The concept of creating a new drive is much more complex. We're talking about partitioning and all of that. So I don't want to make it like it's a drive. It's a simpler way of understanding it to think like a bucket is like a folder, but like a folder with a specific context. Some people will have one bucket and then create folders within the bucket and just go. But typically you have a bucket for a specific context. So like, I think the better example is to look at it like this. You see my, can you see my screen here? You see my file explorer here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You see how we have like home, documents, downloads, music, pictures, videos? Think of buckets like this.
Okay.
Right? Think of them as being this, like very high level folders,
Fine.
because these are actually folders, but they're just treated specially. Right?
For the function that they are going to perform.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So think of buckets more like this than like hard drives, because I can create more, right, easily without any big technical maneuvering. All right. Sorry, Dapo, you had something?
yeah, it's kind of the same thing she was saying. I'm just trying to do exactly what she tried to do to visualize this concept.
Right.
Is this folder, this folder, is it directly in my instance, or is it separate from my instance?
This is completely disconnected from your instance.
So,
has nothing to do with your instance. Yes.
Okay, so for me, my mind's telling me I've got a computer and then I've got this hard drive that I'm holding externally that I can then plug in to any computer. So if I can have 5 instances pointed to one bucket? Yes or no?
You can have
So
5
instances, sorry, let me use the right term. Can I have more than one instance? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, you can have as many instances as you want, right? And yes, if you want to think of a bucket, don't think of it as a hard drive that you can plug into. Think of it as a network drive that you can connect to.
Yeah. Okay.
Because all the connections are over the network.
Gotcha.
And similar to, so for those that work in a corporate environment where you can have like a G drive, right, or shared drives, right? S3 essentially gives you the ability to have those shared drives. And then you can have access control on those shared drives and say, okay, only A, B, C, D, E can access the shared drive, right? So every time you create a new bucket, it is like creating a new shared drive. Now, you can use the regions that you specify in a bucket to specify where that shared drive is accessible and limit access to it, right? So let's say you have an office, a business with an office in New York, in Washington, D.C., and in Houston, right? And you create a shared drive and say that only the people in New York, right? Only the people that work in the New York office can access this shared drive G I just created. That's how the regions work with it. Limits access to that bucket to services that are in that region. Does that make sense? But think of this, yes, you can think of this like a shared drive. If I mapped a shared drive on my computer, and this may be too advanced for some people, but if I mapped a shared drive on my computer, it would show up here. Right? It would show up here. So if you're on Windows and you go to the File Explorer in Windows, that left column, right? Think of it like that, except that it is not on any particular instance. It's on the network directly. You can connect instances to it.
Yeah, that makes sense for me.
That makes sense.
For our free accounts.
Yes.
How big can this get?
I don't know, but as S3 will tell you, I doubt that you will exceed the size, right? But AWS will tell you when you're exceeding.
Right. So is this like me having another like one drive at the moment now? I can just start storing my stuff there, can't I? What's stopping me from doing that?
Yes,
like,
you can. You can.
Like, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can. You can, but I wouldn't recommend. So let's see. We can check it out. AWS S3, right? Free tier limit.
$5 gig, I think it says.
Right. So
that's not so bad.
S3 pricing.
Jeff is not a generous man.
All right. So there is the pricing page there. And storage pricing 0.23. Well, this is very, very cheap because this is the price per gigabyte. Right? Per gigabyte is 2 cents, 2.3 cents per gigabyte. Right? So that's not too bad. I don't think, I mean, if you go broke with S3, then your data
you have a problem.
A lot more. Yeah. Right. So, but S3 pricing is also its own thing because there's also data transfer rates, right? And stuff like that. So you may not store much data on it, but pay a lot because you're doing a lot of transfer back and forth. So, but that's, I mean, there's a whole course on pricing and all that. Let's not jump into the details there. But do we understand where we are now with buckets? And then within buckets, you can create folders. You can create as many buckets as you want. And in each bucket, you can create as many folders as you want. And you can upload files right into the bucket. You can upload files into folders within the buckets. It works just like your file system on your computer, except that this is in the cloud. You're now storing stuff in the cloud, and you can connect to it. And we just looked at how, when you put a file here, you can make it public by clicking on that button. Before we made it public, we got this error, right? And that was because it wasn't public. So let's look a little more at bucket permissions, and I'll show you, I want to show you how you can actually host a static website in AWS.
So that website that you couldn't access is an absolute website that anybody here can type in and see the same thing, or is that something you see relative to your computer?
This my index HTML.
Yes.
So this is just a file, but I'm going to copy this link.
No, like you clicked on make public and you're able to see your HTML file. So
Yes.
that make public, is it public relative to what you are doing, or is it public to anybody in the world that has?
So that's why I said I'm going to copy this link and I'm going to paste it in the chat, and you can access it.
Interesting.
Right? Because I made it public, and from an AWS perspective, public is public. So I made it public. Click on the link. Can anyone access it?
So it's like having a cloud storage, isn't it?
It is cloud storage.
Yeah.
S3 is simple storage service. It is the cloud storage in AWS. This is your cloud storage.
Okay.
All right.
So Yinka, so that would be the difference between a NAS and a SAN, right? The cloud.
Those are terms that most people here don't understand.
Okay.
So let's not go there. Yeah, let's not go there. That's going to make it way too technical for this guy. All right. Okay. So this is so the file is public and confirmed. Anyone can access it, right? Let's look at other properties or other configurations that we can do on our bucket. So we're in our bucket right now. And you notice that there are levels of configuration. We also have on the file level. So the configurations on the file will override that of the bucket. Okay, but let's look at the bucket. So properties. When we come into properties here, there are multiple different properties here, right? Versioning. Versioning is disabled. You can click on that to enable versioning, right? And what that means is it will track the versions of any objects or changes to them in the bucket, right? Server access login. Actually, each tile here has a description, so you can actually read the descriptions to understand what they are, right? So you see versioning keeps multiple versions of an object in the same bucket. The server access login sets up access log records that provide details. Essentially, it tells you who has access to it, right? But it stores those logs on the server. Static website hosting. This is one we're going to play with right now, but allows you to actually use your S3 bucket like a website. Okay, we're going to do that right now. And what happens when you do that? If I come here and I click on that, and I say, use this bucket to host a website. Now I can provide an index HTML file. The default value for the index is index HTML, right? So actually don't need to change it. I can just accept those defaults, right? And I can say save. Now redirect requests. If I say redirect requests, that means that traffic coming here will be redirected somewhere else. You provide the target domain and the protocol, right? What it was before was disabled. So we're going to say use this bucket to host a static website. And we have index HTML. So let's save this. And what happens now is that when I go back, to my bucket, let's just come back to S3, and I come to this my bucket here, right? Actually, let's get it from here. And we come to properties, sorry. You see here, now I have a URL for my bucket. And if I copy this link location, or let me open it in another tab, I actually have a website now at this address. Of course, it's not a very friendly address, right? but I can post this static website here, and there's a way I can map a friendly DNS to this address. If I copy this here and I paste it in the chat, right? You will see that the URL I pasted now is different from the other one. The other one was a path to that file. But right now, I now have this actually as a website. I'm going to do something that is a little outside of infrastructure, but what the type of stuff that infrastructure typically does. One bit of it is not typical infrastructure, but another bit of it is. The Angular app that we have, I'm actually going to deploy it to this S3 bucket, and I will show you an example of how you could deploy an application to S3, right? So very quickly, I'm going to come here to Angular. Actually, do you understand what I did just now? Sorry, I forgot before I move on. Any questions about what I just did?
We understand what you
Yeah,
did,
it's
but we don't know how to. We don't remember how you did it. We understand what
Okay.
you did. Yeah.
Okay, so let's walk through it again. I'm going to my S3 bucket, right? And in properties, okay? Here, the third one is static website hosting. There are a bunch of other properties, but I've gone through 1, 2, and then I stopped at 3 for static website hosting because that was one of my objectives, right? And so when you click here, you now get this form, pretty much. Before I did anything, it was on disable, okay? But I chose the option, use this bucket to host a website. So you can select that, and then you can save. Now it's important, what this does is it actually then turns your S3 bucket into a web server.
I see.
Okay?
So it
Yes.
turns a directory like a regular partition on your hard drive into a server. Is that what you just said?
Not on your hard drive.
I know. I mean,
Right.
I'm making an analogy.
Right. Well, so the right analogy, if you want to go that way,
Yeah.
right, is that it created a virtual host pointing to a directory. So on a local machine, right, on my local machine, I have a bunch of directories. And then on Apache, which is a web server, I can actually point and I can create a virtual host in Apache pointing to a directory, pointing to a folder and say, hey, this folder is actually a website. Serve it. That is more like what this is doing, is that your bucket, you're telling S3, hey, treat this bucket like it contains a website. And this is the entry point for the website. This is the index of the website.
Gotcha.
Right? So you tell it the file name of the index. This file name for the index will be whatever you want it to be. Okay? But now, when you do that, you now actually get a URL.
Here's when you do that by OB featuring Seth Dye.
Alexa, stop. All right. You now have a URL for your static website. It's important to note that this is a static website, which means it can't have any server-side scripts. It can't be PHP, JSP, Python, nothing. Just HTML and CSS. Okay. So what I'm going to do, our Angular applications are actually static.
Right. Sorry to stop you here.
Mm-hmm.
This Angular, this is like the fourth time I've heard this phrase. I'm not in front end, so I have no idea. If somebody could a quick summary of what that is.
So what I'll tell you is this: from an infrastructure perspective, you're going to have a team, right? A development team come to you and say, "Hey, we have this application. We need it deployed." Okay. And your question will be, is it static or is it dynamic? What's the backend technology? That's your concern from an infrastructure point, right? So I am going to be like, okay, this is an Angular application and it's static. That's all you need to know, right? Angular is a JavaScript framework, right? But the output of the framework is a static running application that has JavaScript in it that makes it smart. So, which is why I said I'm going to do things that are slightly out of this, but I don't want to talk about what Angular is and the details. I want to stop at the point of saying that I am going to work from the perspective of, okay, here's a static application, host it on S3.
Okay, I got you.
You
So-
get it?
So
Right.
we're only worried about the output, just so that it produces
Yes.
static pages. Okay, fine.
Right,
Alright, cool.
right. You don't care because what you're going to be given is a built application. And so we're going to, I'm only going to very quickly just do an Angular build just so that I can get it. So I can have the static file. So I'm just going to go city web app, right? And I'm going to say ng build. Just so quickly give me a build. And I also use this because this will be an application, that we can actually see something. All right, so I have a build now. Let's see, where did it build this into? Built it into this. So if I look in here, my dist folder, right? Hold on. Okay, yeah, so. This. So if we look in here, we have, essentially this one. So we essentially actually have a full web application or a full website, right, with an index HTML. Okay, we can take this, all of this, and upload to the S3 bucket, and voila, we have an application. So let's do that here. Who remembers how to upload to an S3 bucket?
Click on upload. Ha 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 ha.
Okay, which upload? Is this upload or another upload somewhere? Okay, this is the only upload.
The biggest, bright, shiniest upload.
All right, so we're gonna upload this. So let's add files, right? Let's come into Classroom, come into Web App, we come into this, we have Web App. Let's see, can we upload multiple files? Select all the files there. I just did a Control A, right? I'll say open. All right, so we have all these files, and I'll say upload. Okay. Uploading all these files into our web app folder. Now we have an index HTML like we had before. Now remember our properties here in our static website hosting. We said our index is index HTML, right? So if I come now, if I come back here to this and I refresh this, oh, what would be forbidden? Why is that?
You have to make public.
Yes, sir. So I need to come here and all these my files here. Except for work stuff, I need to make public. Okay, like that. You give me a big warning and all of that storyline. Yes, make public. All right.
So the index HTML that you just uploaded over supersedes the index HTML that was in that file previously.
I just overwrote it. Similar to
Okay,
how
you
if you
overwrote
copy.
it. Okay.
Yeah, I just overwrote it.
Okay.
Because I uploaded that and then now I've uploaded a new one. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
overwrote.
Mhm.
If I refresh this now, voila, who recognizes this?
Yeah, the front end.
Yeah, only the front end people will know this.
Yeah.
Yes. But this is a website that was created in Angular, right? And it has all the stuff. And it's been uploaded to S3 and hosted. Okay. So that is one of the really cool things that you could do with S3 is use it essentially as a web server, but the caveat is only for static websites. It can be JavaScript. JavaScript is considered static because it's on the client side, but then you get the dynamism out of using JavaScript, out of using something like Angular or Ember or something else, right? But from an infrastructure squad perspective, or someone working with AWS, a team would come to you with this file. You're not the one going to create this file, but they're going to have a build or a package or something, and they'll be like, hey, we need to deploy this on AWS. One of your initial considerations is, okay, is this a static website or does it require a server? If they say, oh, it's a static website, then you know that you can deploy it in S3 and be done with. Now, if they say it's dynamic in that it requires a server side, then you have to think more about things like Elastic Beanstalk, which we will get into next. Okay?
Elastic what?
Elastic Beanstalk.
Okay.
Okay? We'll get to that next. We'll have a slight introduction to Elastic Beanstalk today, and then we'll explore it in more detail in the next session.
So
Okay?
just to be clear between static and dynamic web applications. So static means it's not running on a server.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. When it's dynamic, the server is actually generating the HTML that's sent to the front end. When it's static, it's just HTML. So you can send
So it's like static and DHCP. So something it's giving it out. It's not.
Something like that.
Okay.
Something like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So static means it doesn't change. If you come to this particular application next week, it will look exactly the same, right? But if it's a dynamic application, I could write it such that the server generates a new data. Whenever you call it, it gives the current date and time from the server. So the server always serves a new version of the application. Okay? So that is how you can make an S3 bucket host a website. All right. So before we continue, any other questions? Is anyone here that doesn't know what an S3 bucket is?
I know what a bucket is.
You know what S3 is?
Not really. But I know what a bucket is.
What does S3 stand for?
Simple storage service. It's a storage service.
Right. So is anyone right? So is anyone here that doesn't know what an S3 bucket is? So we've been introduced to the concept of an S3 bucket. We know that it's just storage in the cloud. That's pretty much what it is. It is the storage service in the AWS cloud. And that's it. You can store whatever you want in S3, images, videos, right, audio, files, programs. We've seen that you can actually store an entire website there, and you can host it up on S3. There are many other things that S3 can do, but are beyond the scope of today's particular session. But down the line, as we work, we're going to use S3 more. Now, the approach is similar, right, to what we did with JavaScript, in that it is incremental. We're going to build on these concepts, because when we look at Elastic Beanstalk, you will need an S3 bucket. You will see how you can use an S3 bucket to serve as the trigger point for uploading to Elastic Beanstalk. Okay. When we look at Lambda functions, you see how you can set up triggers between S3 and Lambda. And all that. So each concept that we introduce, we're going to build on it and add to it. And that'll help us explore those concepts deeper, but in context. So right now I can go through all of these in details, and we talk about the permissions and all of that, and it's going to be total Greek. But when we try to use it and we introduce the concept as we're trying to use it, then it would make a little more sense. We've seen, for example, how making it public or not affects your experience, right? When it wasn't public, we got a 403 forbidden, we got a fancy error, all of that. And we saw that it was because I was trying to access it publicly, but I hadn't made it public. Okay? But remember, S3 is just storage in AWS. So at this point, you should be able to identify two key things: EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud, and S3. Right? Is there anyone that's still hung up on what the two are? And I want to pause so we can address those before we move on, because going on to Elastic Beanstalk, you just understand this too. Anyone?
One silly question. What is the
Okay.
EC2? What's the 2 for?
It is, rather than saying ECC, it is
Elastic
like,
Computer. Oh, okay. Okay.
right,
Okay, I got you.
because it's Elastic Compute Cloud, so ECC.
Cloud, okay.
So that's E to
Compute
C.
Cloud. Okay. So the same with the S3, just like 3 S's. Okay, got you.
Exactly. S3 is 3 S's. Simple storage service. Okay. All right. Any questions? Final call. Clarification.
How rich is Jeff Bezos by now?
That's not part of this course, but Google is there to help you with that. Okay. All right. So now let's move on. A lot of these other these other properties, right? Like I said, if you read the description, it explains what it is. There's also a learn more link if you want to really nerd out about that, and you will see what that is. Okay, so each one has a link, or has a link that you can click to learn more about what that is.
On my bucket, I've only got like four of these. You've got like 25.
I don't know why. maybe you have the Mexican bucket, but or the Chinese bucket, yeah. But there's you should have all of these. You have all of these. Okay. So I'm not going to go through. This talks about encryption, object lock, tags, transfer, acceleration, all kinds of other things. Some of them are very technical and very detailed. We don't need them right now, not at this level. We might get back to some of them as we try to do other things in the future. But for now, we'll just stop here because this is where I wanted us to get to S3 today. Okay, let's look at permissions. Now, when we were creating the permission, you remember we saw this, right? Block public access. Now, there's also what are called ACL, so access control lists, right? Now, this is a more advanced concept, right? But this allows you to actually specify specific services, people, roles, and defining exactly what they can do. This gives you a much more granular control over access, right? I won't go into this either. We can we'll probably go into this more detail when we talk about security. But for now, I just want to show what's here. Bucket policy. This also allows you to actually script, manually write out a bucket policy. There's a tool for generating policy down here, the policy generator. And there's documentation if you're interested in figuring out how to everything about bucket policies, right? The tool, the policy generator tool here, allows you to pick, mix and match things, and then it will generate the policy script that you can come and paste here. But that's also an advanced concept. So now, CORS configuration, right? CORS is also a relatively advanced concept. CORS stands for cross-origin resource sharing, right? And I think it's defined up there, yes. Cross-origin resource sharing. And that allows servers in different domains, right, to actually share resources. Normally, if a server or an application is running at google.com and it tries to make certain requests to maybe Yahoo, to a server in yahoo.com, the yahoo.com will not allow those requests because they are across origins. An origin is like a google.com, yahoo.com. But CORS policies allow you to say, okay, allow all requests coming from google.com, or allow post requests coming from google.com, or only allow get requests coming from google.com, right? Stuff like that. So CORS allows different domains to share resources. Okay, that's the concept that we will not deal with today, but we will deal with, for those who are on the back end squad, we will actually deal with CORS on the back end. And we're going to deal with it soon. Okay. Management, these are all management options for the S3 bucket. As with all the other options, we're not going to jump into these today because there's a depth to them, to what we can do. And the access points, we also won't go into access points right now. But we'll pause here. So I wanted us to get as far as static website hosting. Now, if you're really, really curious, you can actually read. There's so much documentation. There's documentation for everything. So you can, just click on learn more. So static website hosting, you click on learn more. It will explain it. All right.
Sorry, Yinka, to take you back just a little on the CORS.
Mm-hmm.
What type of information would be used during that cross domain sharing?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, like if Google wants to connect to Yahoo, what specific type of information would that be? Like, is it, in my head, is it kind of like federated identity or something else?
No.
Okay.
So CORS is a way of preventing. Let me put it this way. Let's say Yahoo, right, has an API, right, that publishes news. Okay, and that API is designed to publish news to Yahoo applications. Maybe the Yahoo app on your phone, the Yahoo web application. Anybody, right? That, of course, for that API to work, it has to be on the web. It has to be open to the public, right? Now, anybody could write an app to try to pull data from that API. So Yahoo is like, no, I only want my applications or authorized domains to pull data from that application. That is the default behavior for application for servers and for browsers. If you look in your console, you actually find cross-origin resource sharing violation or policy restriction or whatever. Now, the way it works then is that Yahoo can say, okay, you know what, any request coming from the google.com domain, I will allow to perform a GET request on my API. What happens is that when the google.com app wants to access that API, it sends what's called an options request to the yahoo.com for the method. So it sends an options request for the GET for that endpoint to yahoo.com. Yahoo.com responds and says, yes, I'll allow you to do a GET, and then send the GET. There's actually always that process. There are two requests for every request that goes out. There's an options and then there's the actual request. So the options request comes back with CORS headers that say you can make this cross-origin request. And so the google.com app will then make that request and move on. But usually it's for APIs. It's for what we call XHR requests. I don't want to get into that because it's way out of scope for this group, but they're typically tied to XHR requests made by browsers or, or applications under the hood. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So this is where we'll stop with S3 right now. To delete any resource, of course, you can just click on that. You can say actions, and you can say delete, right? Or you can click on this here. Oh, actually, no. So for files, you can just click on here, and you typically will also have, download this here. To delete, you have to go into the file, and how am I doing? I'm so tired. To delete a file, you have to select it here, and then come to actions, and then delete right down there. And then you confirm you want to delete it, and then you can delete. All right. And that's it. You interact with your S3 bucket just like you would interact with your file system on your computer, except that this is the cloud. And remember that cloud computing means you're interacting over the internet. So in this case, you're using your browser. You can perform other actions. You can rename the file. You can add tags. You can download it. You can get total size. Right, which you just give you information about it. That kinds of things. There's nothing cryptic or too special about files here. Very similar to your local computer. You can't launch applications from a file here, but you can download it and launch an application off of it. Right? And then remember, they are not public until you make them public. That's it. All right. Let's look at Elastic Beanstalk very, very quickly, very briefly, and we will touch on it a lot more in the next session. The next session will focus more on setting up Elastic Beanstalk applications, deploying to Elastic Beanstalk, and all of that. But to get started, let's look at Elastic Beanstalk. So we come back to the management console, and you can search Beanstalk, and you get Elastic Beanstalk. Okay. Now, what is Elastic Beanstalk? Anyone?
End-to-end web application management.
Well, yes, that's a good way of putting it. But Elastic Beanstalk right, allows you to package all the requirements, right, for an application, right, and essentially deploy them in a repeatable manner. Okay. One of the things with cloud is the ability to scale up and scale down quickly, right? How does that scaling up and scaling down happen? So let's say I have an application, a web application. This is my very nice S3 application. Where is it? Let's say I have this application. And right now, the server that this is on can handle 500 requests. It maxes out at 500 requests. And then on, tomorrow, Sunday, because someone tweeted about my application, there's a huge bunch of traffic that comes to the server, right? What happens? And okay, let's say that there's a huge bunch of traffic, 1,000 people or 800 people try to hit my server. And my server can only handle 500 people. So what's going to happen if my server can't, if 800 people come? My server is going to crash, or 300 people won't be able to access it. The way to solve that is by scaling up. And so what I would do would be to spin up a second server that can handle 500 people. So now my capacity has gone from 500 to 1,000, right? So 800 people come, I'm good. Now what happens if 1,200 people were to have come, 1,200 people? Rather than spin up one server, I spin up two servers, raising my capacity to 1,500. I'll handle the 1,200 just fine. That's scaling up. But how do I spin up a second server that is pretty much identical to my first server? Because I need them to be identical. I need them to serve the same data, right? I need them to talk to the same database. I need the application to be exactly the same. How do I get them to spin up and be the same?
Magic beans.
Well, that is what Elastic Beanstalk helps with, in that I would need some kind of formula or recipe or blueprint for that my application server, right? And that blueprint would contain not just the server structure itself, but also the application. And not just the application, but the version of the application. So that when it spins up a second server, it spins it up with exactly the same version of the application, right? That is one of the benefits of using Elastic Beanstalk, is that you essentially script, okay, this is what my server is going to be like. And all I need to do is to say how many of those servers I need and what version of the application is running on. And Elastic Beanstalk will spin up more and allow you to scale to the skies pretty much. Okay? Now there's detail in that, there's information in that. In the next session, we're actually going to work on setting up Elastic Beanstalk to host this application that we deployed to S3. We're going to set up Elastic Beanstalk to host it. And that's going to be our exercise there. We're also going to see about setting it up to auto scale and configuring, the parameters for it to auto scale. How many instances will it create? Now, when we talk about instances in Elastic Beanstalk, they are actually EC2 instances. You see where the connection is coming again? When you say spin up 3 more servers, it's actually spinning up 3 EC2 instances of a particular type that you have defined in the configuration of the Elastic Beanstalk. When you say deploy this version of the application, it's getting the version from S3. It's an S3 bucket you've connected to the Beanstalk to say, hey, this is where I'm going to put my application versions, and these are the EC2 instances I want you to use when spinning up, when scaling up or scaling down, or deploying a new version of the application. Let's look at what that is like so that you'll see. But then next session, next week, we're going to actually do this and see how it goes. Okay? So if I come here and I say, create a new environment, right? So I'm in Elastic Beanstalk right now. For me, I have an environment I have that's already running and happy. The current state is green, right? I'll come here and create a new environment. So the first, set of options you get, you have two options. What kind of environment? Do you want to create a web server environment or a worker environment? For the project you're working on, we'll go with a web server environment. There's a description here. And it says a web server environment is to run a website, web application, or web API that serves HTTP requests, right? A worker environment is to run a worker application, that processes long-running workloads on demand or performs tasks on a schedule. So, like I said before, there's links always to more information, right? So you can literally walk through this and learn a lot of the details yourself if you're a good reader. All right, so let's jump on. So create a web server environment. What's our application? Software dev training, right? Application tags. These are optional, but these are just, like we can say name. Okay, we can say software dev. A tag is like a label, something that we can use to search, right? And then environment information. Again, this is the environment name, software dev training M, right? Domain, if we have a domain for it, we can put a domain here. If we don't have a domain, you can actually check the availability of the domain and all of that, whatever. But there are details to that we won't bother with right now. Later, when we talk about routing and Route 53 and all of that, we'll get to actually seeing how this works. For now, we'll just leave it blank, all right? And then a description, if you want, you can just put a text description, it's optional. Now, platform, right? You can use a managed platform, and that's a platform published and maintained by AWS, or you can do a custom platform and just stick it with managed platform for now. I mean, we can't even change it here. And now we'll choose a platform. This is, again, now, remember when I said static web hosting versus dynamic web hosting? Because this now is how you would set up for dynamic web hosting, right? So I can say, okay, my backend is going to be what? Node.js, right?
Node.js.
Okay, and what version of Node.js? Or, okay, this is the platform version, not Node.js version. Because this tells us this is Node.js 12. And this tells us the kind of, So platform branch here, we can select, what version of Node and the type of instance running it. So we'll just go with Node.js 12 running on Amazon Linux 2. Okay. And then application code. We can either go start up sample application, existing version, or we can upload our code. If we're uploading our code, we'll have to provide a zip file for that. So let's just go with sample application. All right, and then next session we'll actually upload our code. Let me see. Oh, okay. Let me see. Let me just get a zip file here. Zip this web app here, let me just name this let's see. Okay, so if I check here now, we should have a file called web upload zip. So let's use the upload option now. And then now here's what's interesting. You see, I can have a local file. I can provide a public S3 URL, right? Or I can choose a file. And if I come here, what I'm looking for here is my web upload zip. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question? When it says local file, we're talking local to your machine, right?
Local
Your
to my
physical
machine.
your physical
That's
machine. Okay,
right.
fine. Okay.
That's right. That's right. All right. And then version label, that's just a label for this version that I'm uploading. All right. And then here, now we're going to continue to, we're going to do, rather, we could actually just spin it up right now, just to get it up. But let's continue to more options, just so that you can see some of the other options that are there. Okay. So, these are more complex options, but you know, you can set up presets for single instance, high availability, all of that. These are configurations. We won't go into these details today, but as we go on, we're going to actually explore them some more. The platform, we already selected the platform. The software, we already selected. There are options here. Now, if we look at instances, this is the one that's interesting. If we say edit here, this is where we can modify the instances and security groups. You notice that some of these look like the things that we did on EC2. For now, I'm going to, and then here, under capacity, these are also more details on capacity, right? Environment, type, load balance, whatever. We're not going to go into all these details today. I just want to show you that there's a lot of configuration you can do. So let's just do this and create an environment. Okay. And it's going to run the whole bunch of things and set up an Elastic Beanstalk for this application. So we're going to stop here because we're out of time. But this point is we're going to pick up next week. And I'm going to keep speaking while this is still running. But what I want us to do is to go back into S3, right? Let's work with S3. Let's upload files, create buckets, create folders, like get comfortable with it. Get comfortable with the S3 URLs, right? You know, when you go in and say copy path, because those are things that a lot of the things that we will do going forward will depend on. Okay. Next class, we will pick up right from here. We're gonna you know, tweak the configuration of this Elastic Beanstalk and explore the concepts in more detail. How do you set up auto scaling? How do you set up a high availability? You know, how do you set up an RDS database? Because, for example, our application connects to MySQL, right? On the backend side, you can actually set up your Elastic Beanstalk so it has a MySQL RDS instance attached to it. And whenever you spin it up, it will set up that MySQL as well. The advantages and disadvantages to that, we'll talk about it. But, you know, we'll go through all those details and have the application set up to deploy from S3. Right now, we uploaded the file, but we don't want it so that someone has to go and upload. We want to be able to just put the file in S3 and it triggers the Beanstalk build, right? So Any questions?
I have a question on.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it might not be related exactly, but I struggle with the like the git bash. Like anytime you're working on your side, most of my commands don't work, like the sudo and the rest. I was wondering if there was like a list or where I could go to look at alternatives of what to do on my
Well,
end.
right. So if you're on Windows, you don't need sudo for most of the commands. So if I do a command that has sudo, skip the sudo, and you should be fine in git bash. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're on a Mac, if I do sudo, you need to do sudo.
Okay. I'll give you a quick example, like the zip file that you just tried to do, that you did. On my end, when I tried it, the -r and all that, it just says bash. Zip is not a command that's found.
Yes, because you're on Windows. So the way you would zip on Windows is different. You go to File Explorer, right click, add to compressed archive or something like that.
Oh, really?
That's how you do it on Windows.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm on my computer is Linux, so I run Ubuntu.
Okay.
So some of those Windows thingies, I mean, maybe I have I'm just used to doing things directly off of the command line. So who knows? Maybe I have that option here. I right click on this. Oh, there's a compress option. Yeah. And I can select the type of compression. Yeah, so this is how you do it. But I have literally never done that.
Okay.
Ever. So I was guessing. And yeah. So it's there. So that's what you do in Windows. Come here, right click, look for add to archive. All right. So our beanstalk is done setting up. The health is degraded, which means it is totally not functioning properly. But you can see that it says it has a version of the application and all of that. We'll work on this more tomorrow and resolve this issue. Yeah. Totally jacked up. All right. Any other questions?
Quick question. Do we? I noticed your instance is running. Do you stop it at the end of the class?
By instance, yes, you should stop it, and I'm actually going to stop mine. So here, does that work? Nope. Oh, so shut down. No, I think. Yeah. There. Well, but you can actually, the way to do it would be also from here. If we go back to EC2, I come to my instances here. So I sent a shutdown command, and you can see it says stopping. Right. And I had to do a shutdown now for it to shut down immediately. The same thing here. I'm gonna shut these two down. So this is the new beanstalk we created. You see it's created an EC2 instance here. We'll talk about that more next class.
Okay. I'm still struck. I was wondering if you don't mind if I share my screen, because like when I try to download this is from the first class anyway. When I try to download the instance, I've cloned GitHub, but it's asking me for a username and password for the classroom.
Okay, now hold on 1 second. So I'm going to end the class. So we'll end the class here. All right. So
sorry, can I ask one more question for you quickly on this class? You know how you created what's it called, elastic plastic. What is it called?
The elastic beanstalk.
Elastic plastic.
The elastic beanstalk. I was just a question, and this also goes to the EC2 things. We're creating these PCs. We put in MySQL on it. We're doing all sorts of stuff on these virtual computers. I'm just wondering, who's paying for the MySQL that I'm creating that stuff? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? All these applications.
Yes, Amazon is paying for that.
Right. Okay.
Until you make them big enough to start making money, and then they start billing you, and then they start.
Right. Okay. Fine. Thank you.